It's never expected for us to actually start on time when we schedule a show. My name is Chris. I'm here with Brian. What's up, guys? This is Beyond the Model, not your typical co-host for Beyond the Model. Moose is out of town this weekend, and not your typical day for this show either. We usually do this on Saturday, but staff was all a little backed up yesterday, so we're going to try to jam in the show here until about 10:30. We might hang for a few minutes later just because we got started late, but typically in this window, Brian, thank you for joining me this morning. I do a last minute 30-minute Q&A in our Discord. So for those of you subscribed to YouTube that aren't in our Discord, definitely check that out because we do that every single week of the regular season here for you guys. I have what I post every week in Discord, which is called our cheat sheet for the slate, some core plays for low risk or cash contests, some GPP plays that I've been looking at, and then this is pretty much our entire underperforming wide receiver list for this slate as well. So for 30 minutes, we will take any questions you guys have. And this show's purpose is to actually talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. So drop questions in the chat here, and we will steer the conversation in that direction. But most importantly, Brian, how are you today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah, like you said, schedule's a little thrown off with the Sunday morning show. Got the London game going on now with the Jermichael Hasty touchdown, fully helping everyone in their fantasy lineups. But I'm good, man. What's up? How you been?
Getting ready for another NFL Sunday. You know how it is, my friend. We have a lot of injury news this week. Like we've had a ton all season long. I know you've been breaking your fingers doing the injury summary for our Discord there. I've been doing a little bit of that as well when we update the daily plug. But I think the biggest news that we got overnight from Adam Schefter, Brian, as far as someone that's not, unlikely to play, is Cooper Kupp. Looks like he's going to be out for at least one more week for the Rams. Did I miss anything else? Does that sound right to you?
No, pretty quiet on that front. Overnight news and even the Saturday elevations and downgrades was pretty straightforward for positional players. So we didn't have to make too many changes this morning to our projections, our the model, our lineups if we've already built lineups. And honestly, the biggest injury news that I noted myself was Houston is going to be without 4 defensive players. So that's a huge bump to Green Bay's offense.
Mm-hmm.
Carolina is missing a bunch of guys on defense, as is, let me scroll up on my notes here, as is Seattle. Seattle's missing both of their outside corners and they're starting strong safety. So just another addition to the already chalky Atlanta stacks.
I'm going to say, so you're telling me that the most popular wide receiver on DraftKings and FanDuel today, Drake London, is probably going to be part of the keys to the safe this afternoon. And that is a good transition, I think, into the low-risk core here. For those who read the Daily Plug, who watched my preview video that we posted on yesterday morning, I do love Justin Jefferson this week, Brian. Spoiler alert, our model does as well. He's the #1 receiver in the Occupy model for this slate. He's also the #1 underperforming wide receiver for this slate. But I have backed off of him a little bit for low risk builds just because the salary is a little too high this week. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and you can tell by the ownership there, the difference, right? Justin Jefferson, we have projected 19% right now. And you go down to Drake London, 24%. It makes sense because London, despite getting all the targets as a wide receiver one and a great offense, still only $6,900 on DraftKings. No sense to pay the extra $1,600 for Jefferson. However, Jefferson does have that 40-point upside for tournaments that we've been accustomed to. And you see his teammate Jordan Addison on there as well, Chris. So pretty natural Minnesota stack in there in a game that should be pretty high scoring.
So I know when you and Moose do this show, we obviously talk DFS, but there are other things that you guys like to mix in. And as we get ready for the rest of the week 7 slate to kick off at 1 p.m. this afternoon, I didn't know if you had any thoughts on Survivor this week that you wanted to share with our viewers. This is one of those weeks, Brian, where we have a lot of big spread games. So I think that is what jumps off the page to me. We have Buffalo favored against Tennessee pretty heavily. We've got your Washington Commanders against Carolina. And we even got the Rams against the Raiders. But I didn't know if there was anything else, at least in the survivor pool land of things, that you wanted to cover here.
Yeah, dude, I don't know who's still left in Survivor, but if somehow you've threaded that needle for the past 6 weeks, Buffalo and Washington project to be the most popular teams today, depending on your pool and who people have taken. But you see public pick percentages; they should be the highest, and that's pretty spot on. Washington, this is the best week to use them. Buffalo is the third best week to use them. The Rams is probably a sneaky under the radar pick against if you're not into playing the chalk and Survivor. Best week to use the Rams against the Raiders, who have just traded away guys starting Aiden O'Connell, really tough all around season so far for the Raiders. So the Rams are probably the underrated
Yeah,
pick.
I that's kind of what I looked at as well. I do like the fact that the Rams are coming off their bye week at home, playing effectively a UFL team this weekend. So
Yep.
seems like a pretty good spot as well. I guess maybe even Cincinnati against the Browns is probably getting somewhat overlooked as well. Uh, People may have already burned Cincinnati though. So, any props that you have fired on? I can tell you I haven't really looked at much this week, to be honest with you. So I don't really have much on my agenda as far as this is concerned. It's been pretty much all DFS for me.
I am super prepared because I also have not done any prop betting so far. So we will ignore that segment and we will continue on with DFS. And
Cool.
again, this is live, guys. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. We will answer them live. You guys drive the show.
Well, I got excoriated in the comments last week on the scheduled video about not doing enough FanDuel talk, and I thought that was honestly rightfully so. I didn't do enough FanDuel talk in week 6, but we actually have a pretty good reason, I think, to talk a little bit more about FanDuel builds today, Brian. Just because we do have a millionaire maker over on FanDuel, there isn't always one available. It's a $250 entry fee today for FanDuel, but the contest obviously a little different with access to that Sunday night football game between the Jets, the new look Jets with Devontae Adams now in tow, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't know if you are playing this contest at all, Brian, or if you've thought about a FanDuel lineup at all today. But what do you think about FanDuel today?
Yeah, I haven't. And honestly, a lot of the same lines up. If you guys play college football, you know, Lucas, our longtime writer, puts in the daily plug on college football on Saturdays where are some extra games on FanDuel. And most of the time his advice is mostly just DraftKings, but here's some extra guys that you can play. And that's kind of the same for the FanDuel main slate for NFL, where it's here's some other guys you can play. I guess the most interesting aspect of that game is that Russell Wilson is starting playing most of the game. I guess they'll have some Fields packages as well. But we have Pickens as an underperforming wide receiver. And I think one way to capitalize on that underperformance is a change at quarterback. We always look for reasons why guys may have been underperforming and could overperform in the future, and that could be the reason why. So I like George Pickens today on that slate, and obviously across Devontae Adams is super interesting as well because despite not knowing the playbook this year, he's played in this offense in the past and has played with Aaron Rodgers. He could easily step in. He's only $6,900. I mean, would it shock anyone if he gets 10 targets tonight? No. So
Yeah, would it shock anyone if he got 15 targets tonight? Also, no. I mean, it's just Adams $6,900 tonight on that slate. Pickens underperforming his opportunity, $6,000. Again, you don't have to mix these guys into your builds with the other things that we've recommended, but I think you can see on the screen here. I do like Devontae Adams as a tournament play on FanDuel today at that low price. We're projecting him under 5% today. I don't know how true that's going to actually end up being, Brian, but I'll definitely buy into that here. Okay, we do have some questions coming in here. Let's go through them in order. Chinedu, thank you for being here, sir. Rams passing as contrarian to Kyron. So what do you think about Rams passing attack today? Matthew Stafford, Tutu Atwell, one of our underperforming wide receivers, Jordan Whittington, and then I think the only thing that won't be contrarian there would be the tight end, Colby Parkinson. But it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I like it, and I was running some early builds, and I got that as well. So I think that's a great way to get different. Kyron has scored a touchdown in like 700 straight games, so I'm sure that still continues. But there's enough to go around, especially if we believe the Rams control this game, and there are the cheap enough pieces, and you add in Stafford, low on quarterback. I like it. So let's bounce these questions back and forth, Chris. So you're not the only one asking. Randy scores in the chat. Longtime member. What's up, Randy? Making his court mandated appearance. This monthly appearance. Says, what's up, fellas? I have 17 tickets to the $100 milli today. Shout out Occupy Satellite Strategy. Appreciate you, Randy. Good work on that. What's your thoughts on the size of the quarterback pool to use? And Chris, I'll answer it a little bit, and I'll let you fill it in. But I think it's kind of a one or the other. Either you play a good amount of quarterbacks and you have a tight core of players that you play with them, or you flip that around and you have maybe 3 or 4 quarterbacks and you play a tight game stat core, and then you can rotate guys around there. What do you think?
So this is a throwback, admittedly. A lot of our viewers, I think Randy might remember, hopefully. You used to do a show called Beyond the $1 Million Mission. Excuse me, this is Beyond the Model, where you would review winning lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel every week. And what we would do is actually study the habits of winning like max entry players. 17, obviously not even anywhere close to 150, but we did talk a little bit about 20 max. So that's pretty close to like a 20 max allocation, Randy. I think the meat and potatoes of it is that we uncovered that in 150 max contests, the most successful players are playing like at maximum 4 to 6 quarterbacks. So at the amount of tickets that you have to the $100 contest today, Randy, I would actually lean towards the 20 max nugget that we uncovered when we did that research. And I think it's like between 2 and 4 quarterbacks tends to be the ideal sweet spot. But to Brian's point, like if there are certain angles that you are trying to play and you want to play less quarterbacks than that or more quarterbacks than that to get, over the field on the angles that you like that's certainly acceptable. For example, I'll just go to like our top stack that we have today in the plug and on the cheat sheet. Like if you really want to get leverage on this Minnesota stack, which is at least my favorite stack today, then I think it would be okay. Like this is a hypothetical example to have, more Sam Darnold lineups than any other quarterback or something like that. So I hope that makes sense.
Yep.
Brian, speaking of that, what do you think about Jordan Addison today from Anthony?
Yeah, still on the field, still running routes, still getting targets, underperforming, 8% ownership. So whether you're stacking Darnold and double stacking it with Jefferson and Addison, or you're playing for leverage off of Jefferson, Addison's a great high risk play today. We like it a lot. The model likes it. Underperforming status, always going to get a check mark in our books. Chris Phillips asking thoughts on Juju. Obviously had that blow up game on the showdown slate, won a lot of people a lot of money at pretty low ownership. What are your thoughts on him? He is limited, but it sounds like he's going to play today. He'll be fine. So what are your thoughts on him in that Kansas City passing game?
Dude wasn't good enough to be a part of this lovely Patriots offense that we have to watch this morning, but apparently is going to be the best receiver on the Chiefs for the rest of the season. I think I covered it briefly in the other preview video after this live stream. There's still a little bit of time to check that out, by the way. I think you have to play him in your low risk contests on DraftKings, punish the algo for that $4,000 price tag. He's coming in with a Q tag, but Andy Reid has told us not to worry about that. It was just like a little hamstring thing he had in practice. He's 100% going to play today. On FanDuel, he becomes, I guess, like this is the meat and potatoes of it. I've said that twice now. Whether you're playing on DraftKings or FanDuel, like that's the context of the question. Because on FanDuel, he's going to be under 5%. I think he's therefore an interesting tournament play that we should expect to run a lot of routes and get a lot of targets in a high total game in that 4 p.m. window between the Chiefs and the 49ers. But over on DraftKings, he's literally not providing you any differentiation in high risk. So I would look at him as like a must in cash in DraftKings tournament, DraftKings contest, excuse me. But if you're playing like these large field tournaments, there are other cheap receivers I think you could play for differentiation if you wanted to. I hope that makes sense. Brian, Jets here. John Cotter, thanks for watching. Wants to know more about what's going on with this Tyler Huntley ranking in the Occupy model. Number 2 quarterback, I think, in the model last I looked. I think that's a function of just, he's asking if it's a product of Indy having poor defense. Do we think he's a viable play? I think that's certainly part of it. I think the other factor that the model's probably picking up on is cheap quarterback has been like the number one thing that has been winning week in and week out, and he certainly fits that as well. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it has the theoretical rushing upside as well, so the model likes that. Indy is really poor at defending specifically short passes and medium length passes, and Miami does target that area of the field a lot, especially with their burners and Waddle and Tyreek Hill. We have Tyreek Hill as the underperforming, so that adds a little bit to Tyler Huntley's upside as well. And yeah, it is really price adjusted for sure. So is he viable? The model's picking up on it. The model's been pretty good, and a lot of times so far this year we've been like, why is the model so high on that quarterback or that guy in general? And they end up performing pretty well, rightfully so. So I think in tournaments, large field tournaments, yes. And you can run him back with whether it's Trey Sermon, he's an underperforming running back according to any expected fantasy points metric. So you could do a little 2x1 there. But yes, long story short, the meat and potatoes of it is that yes, yeah. I think he's viable as a cheap option. So Byron is asking, and Chris, I know you covered this in your preview video, your slate preview video. Again, guys, go check that out after this video. A nice little video Chris does every single week. Who are your favorite value plays at wide receiver and running back on DraftKings? So obviously Juju is the favorite value receiver. Do you have a favorite value running back? And maybe just like in addition to that, a pivot away from Juju or a pivot away from that value running back that could be useful in tournaments.
And if we're looking at what the field is considering a value today, the chalk is on Chuba Hubbard with Carolina and Tony Pollard for Tennessee, excuse me. Like both are huge underdogs, which always like kind of jumps off the page to me as like, why is everybody playing these guys in low risk contests today? But that would be like the values everyone's looking at. I guess if you want a pivot away from that, I like Kareem Hunt on DraftKings today at $6,000 as a pivot off of that Chiefs passing stack too. That seems pretty cheap, and he has been clearly the number one running back due to all the injuries there over the last couple of weeks. Really has kind of slid back into 2017, 2018 in that Chiefs offense, rejoining them this season. At wide receiver, obviously Juju. I think some of the other values are Trey Tucker with the Raiders at 4,200, number one receiver now for the Raiders. Unfortunately, unless his name is Brock Bowers and he runs around a set of tight end positions, might not see a lot of volume, but the field is going back to that today. And then hold your nose a little bit, but Jerry Jeudy with the Cleveland Browns, $4,800 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. When I actually made the preview video on Friday, he was projecting for a little bit more ownership than we have him at now. That has come down a little bit, I think, because of some of the other value spots like Juju, like Trey Tucker, that people want to play now instead because Cleveland has just been so bad. But I think that makes Jeudy actually an interesting pivot. He's going to be right around 10% owned in tournaments, and I still think viable in low risk contests. I see a path to Jeudy having like 7, 8, if not more targets, operating as the number one receiver. And then you could even go and scrape the bottom of the barrel in salary here to the number two receiver with Elijah Moore, who's 3,200 on DraftKings and I believe 4,600 over on FanDuel. Those should be your two primary receivers for Deshaun Watson in that offense today, alongside, of course, David Njoku at tight end. This is one of those spots that we see this in NBA DFS a lot, Brian, right? Where there's some injuries, players are ruled out, and there are all of a sudden, all the opportunities are reallocated to these underpriced players because prices are static and don't move. Yes, Cleveland is the worst offense in modern football history. Understand that. But they're still playing a game today. These guys are still going to touch the football, and they're all underpriced for their roles. So I think they are good tournament values.
Agree. Totally agree. And real quick, their offensive line is as healthy as it probably has ever been so far this year with Wills and Conklin, and I think Ethan Pochik, their center, should be back as well. So maybe, and again, that doesn't change the fact that Deshaun Watson has been historically inaccurate. Maybe he gets an extra second or two today than he normally does.
All it takes is one play, I guess, right? All right, let's move on to some other questions here. Justin, or I guess, excuse me, I don't want to skip over Christy. Christy wants to know if Tyreek Hill is going to be relevant again today. What do you think about Tyreek?
Probably not, but I think he's worth the risk at 1% and underperforming status. Plus, the model's picking up on this Indy defense. So I will say he's likely not to be relevant, but there's a chance he could put up 30 or 40 in this spot. So I hope that answers it. I'm going to answer Justin's question. What about Dalton Johnson Leggett stack against Washington? I like that game a lot. And Washington should score a lot of points, so Carolina should have to throw to keep up. So I like that. And Glenn asked, who are your personally top 3 ranked running backs? Chris, I believe Glenn's a FanDuel player, so Chris, maybe on FanDuel, top 3 running backs today for you.
And he's asking personally, so I'm going to ignore the Occupy model. I like
personal rankings.
I like Kyron Williams, number 1. Joe Mixon is number 2 for me on this slate. I think probably not fully recognizing the value of what his role is because he's only played like 2 healthy games in this offense, and last week was a blowout. I believe that's the underdog side today on the road at Green Bay, but love Mixon in that spot. And then I have Kenneth Walker, who I actually think is a name we have to keep an eye on this afternoon just because he was downgraded to questionable yesterday with an illness, but I think he's still expected to play. $7,500 there over on FanDuel. These guys are all super expensive on FanDuel, so if you're looking for a value on FanDuel, all the best running backs on FanDuel today I think are above $7,500. I guess the theme of the last few minutes of this show is how about Devin Achane with the Dolphins? He's just $6,900 as a tournament play on FanDuel today. Should still have a ton of carries, ton of targets, and nobody's really playing him.
I like that. I like all those, Chris. So good calls there. And yeah, I think the Walker thing, just by the way, you mentioned it yesterday. I think it was in Discord that teams just have to be really careful these days with the injury reporting. So anytime you see something like this, it's more so out of precaution and not getting fined than a guy truly being questionable. So yeah, we think Kenneth Walker is probably fine. All right, Chris, what other questions we got here?
Hawk Dark wants to know if we're down with Purdy and Kittle because Kittle is at the top of the tight end model for a 3 entry max contest on DraftKings. And I think that is totally fine today, to be honest with you. Bets wants them to put Jameson. I think the entire football viewing public wants them to do that at this point. So, yes, please do that, especially if we're playing Browns today. Okay, Samuel, thanks for being here, Samuel. On a 10 gamer, is it viable having under 5% players? I think the short answer to that is yes. But, Brian, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, definitely. Again, ownership still concentrates even more on 10 gamers. And despite the less than 5% owned players being objectively worse plays, we still see large field GPP winning lineups have those guys all the time on 10 game slates. Now, you're playing small field GPPs, you're probably not necessarily looking to definitely get one of those guys in. But if it naturally fits, yes, you're just really not playing the 0% guys, right? Because Tyreek Hill's 1%. That's a great tournament play, right? Any of these other guys that are, who else? Dontavian Wicks, 1%. He's not a 0, and these aren't the worst plays ever. It's not like you're playing a 1% guy on Showdown. So yes, they still are viable. Still definitely try to get them in your large field GPPs. If it naturally fits in smaller GPPs, then certainly you can go for that as well. And Jathan, I hope that's how it says. It looks like Nathan, but it starts with a J. So we'll say Jathan. If it's wrong, Jathan, let me know. Nick Chubb, he's asking Chris. So
Just Nick Chubb ? And if you watched any of our best ball shows all summer, man, I talked about Nick Chubb every single stream, buying him in the mid rounds. And now we're finally here. We get him in week 7. I think we could consider this as returning earlier than a lot of people expected at the beginning of the summer, Brian. But as far as today's slate is concerned, they are big underdogs against the Bengals. However, the Bengals are a slightly below average rush defense. The volume for Chubb is what we're not certain of. Jerome Ford is going to be out today. So there's going to be Dante Foreman and Pierre Strong Jr. backing up Chubb. At least we think that's how it's going to go. Brian, the Browns have been pumping Nick Chubb like crazy. The social posts have been crazy. He's like Batman coming back to save the team. There's even been some rumblings on the Browns beat that the coaching staff has kind of resign themselves to the fact that they have to play Watson at quarterback. It's a mandate from ownership, so maybe they'll shift to like a more run-heavy offensive attack that is curiously timed with Nick Chubb returning to the starting lineup. We've got Nick Chubb at I don't know how right this is going to be. We have him at 0% on DraftKings, 1% on FanDuel. I mean, this just smells like a great tournament play today, right?
yeah, again, we don't know, but horrific knee injury, first game back. I can't imagine they give him more than 10 touches. But it's also easy to imagine how the Browns ownership does anything with their decision making. So I could see it. And the Tompkins rule, which was made famous back in the UFL, where we developed this rule: if the social media team posts about a player more than 3 times, they're probably a good play. Tompkins back for the DC Defenders. For whatever reason, that game, the social media team pumped him up pre-game, and he ended up scoring a touchdown that game. Chubb has gone well and beyond the Tompkins threshold. They've tweeted about him with like anime and as many times and as many ways as possible the social team has tweeted about him. So if you're into it, to the Tompkins rule, Chubb is a great play today. So
Chubb has to be the savior of this Browns team. The Browns are basically telling us that this is the only chance they have. So I like him in tournaments today. We'll sum it up on that. Thank you, Jathan, and you did say it correctly, Brian. So appreciate you being here, sir. Thoughts on double tight end for DraftKings 3-entry max because there are not great values. I would disagree. I think that we have a lot of great values. I think I just talked about quite a few of them. Brian, I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, my initial thought is, oh my God, never played 2 tight ends. I do think it's possible today because there are a couple 3K tight ends that look pretty decent. I don't hate it as much as I normally would on a slate. I'll say that. Again, I try to avoid it if I can, but I think especially in smaller contests, there are some ways that gets there. And if you like the rest of your lineup and you want to double punt tight end, I don't think it's the worst thing possible. So
yeah, so like there's values at receiver. There's mid-range running backs tend to be what everybody's playing these days anyway. But I mean, to your point, Colby Parkinson going to be very popular. Underperforming, by the way. Talked about that in Friday's video. David Njoku, pretty cheap as well. And then we have the injury spot that opened up with Philadelphia with Grant Calcaterra. I think he's a great tournament play this week. Have that in the cheat sheet on the screen here for everybody to see here. Just 3,200 on DraftKings too. Minimum price on Yahoo for anyone still playing over there. 5,100, excuse me, on FanDuel. Just $100 less than Parkinson. So I think that Calcaterra, he'll definitely have less projectable volume than these other guys because it's kind of tough to project a lot of targets outside of AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. But we saw him run a ton of routes last week, so like the template's right there. Dallas Goedert unfortunately going down like basically in the first series of that game. So we should be expecting Calc to basically play the full complement of snaps as the tight end one in that offense, right?
I would think so. And just more on that game, we got a couple questions on Hertz. We got a question on Neighbors and AJ and stacking that game. So I know you're interested in stacking that game. Obviously, my biggest concern is Andrew Thomas, the offensive tackle, being out for the Giants. Jordan Mailata, the left tackle, being out for the Eagles. Neither one of those are great for their offensive prospects. But I know you're still interested, and it's not, we're not going to completely downgrade these offenses because of the playmakers they have. So I assume you're taking that with a grain of salt, but still willing to stack, especially the Giant side. It looks like, right?
Yeah, so what I'm looking at is shout out to Aaron Schatz, formerly of Football Outsiders, FTN Fantasy, DVOA. We've got the Eagles are a below average pass defense this season. I think any Eagles fan could probably tell you that. The Giants, although there are some injury situations to overcome, actually have a top 6 pass blocking offensive line on the season. So that's going to be a downgrade there. There's no question. But the other thing that is terrifying if you're thinking about fading this player today, Eagles are the worst defense in the league this season defending wide receiver ones. And the Giants are not only getting their wide receiver one back, they're getting a wide receiver one back that they gave literally a 50% target share in his last 3 healthy games. So I think this is an example, Brian, of a spot where we can kind of not completely throw the rules out the window, because obviously we like high team totals, we like shootout games, but if we go with skinny stacks or smaller stacks, I'm thinking a Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors, and a bring back from the Philadelphia side, or the other way, play Hurts with one pass catcher and a bring back with Neighbors, frankly, from the Giants side. I think that's okay today because we got the concentrated volume there in the offenses, where even if the game is not as high scoring as some of these other games, if all the volume is going to those players, I think you can still win with that.
I think so too. Yeah, I think that's the key, right? Is projectable volume, and if it's concentrated volume, you can make plays like that. Chris, by the way, my internet is being extremely spotty. There is a high chance I just cut out at some point immediately, so just be prepared for that.
All right. We're up against it. It's about 10:30 in the morning, so we'll hang for about 4 or 5 more minutes and try to wrap up these final questions. Thank you to everybody who has checked out the live stream. Really, really appreciate that. Brian, I will give a rundown of what to expect for content for the rest of the weekend here, and then maybe we can answer some of these final questions after that. Sound good?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So we have Sunday Night Football Plug that'll be posted on OccupyFantasy.com right around 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our one of our NFL streamers, our NBA writer streamer Chuck, will have that up for you. And then we have another 2-game short slate for Monday Night Football tomorrow. So Brian, what are your plans there?
Yeah, Jack and I, as soon as I get up with him, we will put a video, whether it's a live stream or a pre-recorded video tomorrow for the 2-gamer. We'll have projected ownership for tonight's game. Later today, we'll have projected ownership for the 2-gamer and the showdown slates tomorrow morning. Yeah, so always love doing the 2-gamers with Jack. We'll have some content. Just make sure you're subscribed here on YouTube. It's free to do so. You'll get notified when we go live. We're so close to 10K subscribers. Give us a subscribe, and that way you'll just get notified tomorrow whenever Jack and I post a video.
So Courtney here. I think you already answered this a little earlier, Brian, but Dalton stacks. I know you like that game today. I prefer the Washington side of that game, but I can definitely see it with Dalton and Deontay Johnson, who should be okay today. So definitely feel free to do that if you want to do that, Courtney. Christy, once again, thanks for being here. Jack, what do we think about Trey Tucker for large field millionaire maker? I think he's okay, but he is going to be popular. You're not getting low-owned differentiation there. Just be aware of that, but a good value play. Quentin Mitchell with a pick 6. Could happen. We'll see. You guys are great. No, you're great for being here. Thanks, Christy. Double stacks more prominent on a 10 gamer. I'll let you take that question, Brian. That's more strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So just if you think about it in the most extreme fashion, if you think of a 1-game slate, a showdown slate, it is much more likely that the game is stacked, obviously, right? Or a quarterback is throwing to multiple receivers, right? If there were 100 games, it's less likely because there's so many other options to fill in. The less options you have to fill in, the more likely that 1, a game stack is optimal, but 2, you end up with a winning lineup depending on the contest size you're in because you're finding a game environment that's scoring more points than expected or other people are not playing. So yes, 3x1 stacks. When we get to these bye week slates, that is when, and we talk about this in our free daily fantasy strategy guide for NFL on the site, that yes, 3x1s, 3x2s become much, much, much more viable. And Chris, even last week we saw Tampa Bay mega stacks, which are rare but still profitable on slates depending on pricing and projections on these 10 gamers, these 11 gamers, compared to the 13 gamers we see early in the season, late in the season.
Shout out Brian Thomas, 58-yard catch just now.
Beast.
So I
Absolute beast.
couldn't get get out of the show without mentioning my boy Brian Thomas and my other boy Brian Jester being here. Thank you for doing the show with me. What about what a great transition, right? What about Algier against the Seattle defense today? So I think it's pretty thin to play backup running backs on 10-game slates. So I don't think I would do that today, Justin. But if you want to play some of the single game showdown contests on DraftKings, especially because they basically offer one for every single game, I think that would be a really good tournament play there specifically. And then Austin Eckler, same kind of question. We're expecting Brian Robinson to return for the Commanders today. And I believe, spoiler alert, he's actually the number one tournament play in our model today. So just by virtue of that, I think that means we're not really in favor of playing Eckler on a 10-game slate here or an 11-game slate on FanDuel. So I think that's going to do it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. There is still a little bit of time to read the Daily Plug and to watch the other preview video I put together on Friday that talks about how to play low-risk contests optimally, that talks about my favorite stacks, which are also on the screen right now. Good luck today. We hope to see some screenshots in the Discord later, and we will be back on this channel tomorrow, Brian and Jack, to go over Monday Night Football here in Week 7.